2014. Okay, good morning, everybody. Okay, we will start with the homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Okay, so today we are continuing with the sutta that we started last week. This is sutta number 115 in the middle length discourses. It's called in Pali the Bahudhātuka Sutta, which means the discourse on many kinds of elements. Okay, just to sort of recapitulate, the Buddha begins the discourse by highlighting the difference between the foolish person who is the cause of much trouble and misery for himself and others, and the wise person who never causes trouble or difficulties for himself or others. Then he urges the monks to be wise people, to be inquirers. Then Ananda asks him, how can a monk be called a wise man and an inquirer? Then the Buddha says that he should be skilled in the elements, skilled in the bases, skilled in dependent origination, and skilled in what is possible and what is impossible. So these are like the main headings of the discourse, the main topics that he'll cover. And now the Buddha, since the Buddha mentioned the elements first, he explains different types of elements, different groups of elements. So in section 4, he starts off with the 18 elements. Those are the 6 sense-based, 6 sense objects, 6 sense faculties, and 6 types of consciousness. And then he goes into another set of elements. These are the 6 elements, the 5 material elements: earth, water, fire, air, space, and consciousness. And then he goes into the third category of elements, are the 6 types, which are actually 6 elements, which are actually 5 elements or types of feelings: pleasure, joy, pain, sorrow, equanimity, and ignorance. That is what we covered last week. So now we come to section number 7, where Ananda asked the Buddha whether a monk can be called skilled in the elements in some other way. And then the Buddha mentions that there is such another way, and he enumerates another set of 6 elements. These are called, if you look in the text, the sensual desire element, the renunciation element, the ill will element. Then here we translated very literally the non-ill will element, but let's be a little less literal. We'll call it the goodwill element. So ill will versus goodwill. Then the cruelty element, which is contrasted with the non-cruelty element. Again, let's be a little less literal, and we'll translate this as the compassion element. And so these elements, if you're familiar with some of the other ways in which the Buddha expounds the discourse, expounds his teaching, does this remind you of any other set of categories or any other analysis that you've come across previously? husband. Yeah.
Sounds like wrong view, right view. For
Very close, not exactly.
for the
Just go one step further, and then you.
intention.
Right, exactly. These correspond exactly to the wrong intention and right intention in the Noble Eightfold Path. So in the Noble Eightfold Path, we have the 8 factors: right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, right concentration. So if we just focus in on the second factor of the path, I think we could find it in Sutta 141. Well, in 141, it's actually done expounding only the right intention, but we find it on page 1100. Here we have right intention, the intention of renunciation, intention of non-ill will or goodwill, intention of non-cruelty or compassion. And we also find it, I think, this contrast in the sutta that we'll be taking next week. Exactly, on page 935. In section 11, we have what is wrong intention, the intention of sensual desire, the intention of ill will, and the intention of cruelty. That is wrong intention. And then in paragraph or section 13 on page 935, starting at the very end, actually going over really to page 936, we have the intention of renunciation, the intention of goodwill or non-ill will, and the intention of non-cruelty or compassion. And so here in this discourse on elements, these types of thoughts, for some reason they're referred to as elements. It's a rather unusual designation for them, but we could more conveniently think of them as different types of thoughts. And these 2 types of thoughts fall into 3 groups which are opposed to each other. There is the intention of sensual desire, or thoughts of sensual desire, and then that is counteracted by the thought or the intention of renunciation, of giving up the objects of sensual desire. Then there is the thoughts of ill will, anger, resentment, hatred, antagonism, and so forth. And those are overcome by the intention of goodwill, which becomes most manifest in the development of what's called metta, maitri, loving kindness, the wish for the welfare and happiness of others. And then there is the intention of cruelty, which is expressed in the wish to inflict harm and suffering on others. And then that's overcome by the intention of non-cruelty or compassion, the feeling of empathy for those who are afflicted with suffering and manifesting in the wish to relieve the pain, misery, and suffering of others. Okay, so this is a fairly basic It's a bit puzzling that they're called elements, but once you understand that here what's being pointed to by the word elements are these thoughts or intentions, then the meaning becomes quite self-evident. Okay, we can move on now to the next section. I'll take the next 2 sections, then I'll ask whether there's any questions. Okay, so after the Buddha gives this explanation, then Venerable Ananda asks whether there's another type of elements in which a monk can be skilled. And the Buddha says that there is. And then he explains that there are these 3 elements: the sense sphere element, the fine material element, and the immaterial element. And here it seems to me that this word dhatu in Pali can be translated in 2 different ways in English, whereas for some reason in Pali the 2 meanings overlap. So far we've been translating this word dhatu as element, but in this context, in this passage, it seems dhatu is best rendered as realm, R-E-A-L-M. So these are the 3 realms of existence. We always have to be mindful that I'm a dog tied to a post. But unlike a dog, I can take my post along with me. Okay, so these are the different spheres or realms of rebirth, the different planes into which beings can be reborn in what we call samsara, the cycle of birth and death. So this is the totality of samsara, and then it's divided into these 3 basic spheres or 3 realms. So we have the sense sphere, which is the sphere or realm in which experience through the senses is most prominent, and in which sensual desire is the main driving force of living beings. And so sometimes the sense sphere is also called the desire realm. And this includes 5 planes of existence. Starting from the bottom, there's the hell realms, Then there's the animal realm, then the realm of the afflicted spirits or hungry ghosts, then the human plane of existence, and then there's a number of heavenly realms, sensual heavenly realms. And then there is above the sense, you say in the sense or form, in the sense sphere, sensual desire is the driving force. But if a human being develops the mind to the deep levels of samadhi, concentration, what they call the meditative absorptions, then the mind, even in the human world, goes beyond the grip, the force of sensual desire, and experiences certain very elevated planes of experience in which the mind is unified, concentrated, filled with bliss, joy, peace, tranquility. And now those states of consciousness generate a particular powerful karmic force. And so when death comes, the karmic power of developing those states of consciousness as a human being, that karmic power will propel consciousness beyond the sense sphere to one of the planes in the form sphere, or the fine material sphere, so that the person will be reborn in one of these very elevated realms, in which they still have a physical body, but it's a very subtle kind of body, and they don't experience the grosser types of sense experience. But they'll still have some consciousness of forms and sounds, and they'll spend most of their time in meditative absorption. So these are really like, we call them divine planes of existence. And there are approximately, actually I think it's probably closer to 15, I didn't do an exact count. But there are a number of planes within this realm of existence, which are graded according to the level of samadhi, the level of concentration. And then, again, this is for a human being, by developing samadhi meditation even further, by strengthening the power of concentration, it's possible to go beyond even the levels of concentration that lead to the form sphere and to attain certain formless types of concentration. We meet these in the texts under the names the sphere of boundless space, the sphere of boundless consciousness, the sphere of no thingness, and the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. So one who attains these states as a human being, these meditative absorptions, by the power of that samadhi, assuming that they are able to maintain these states of concentration through the rest of their life, that power of concentration generates a karma that propels the consciousness at death to rebirth in the formless sphere. In the formless sphere, or immaterial sphere, there's no physical body. The being is just pure consciousness, so to speak. Consciousness together with mental functions. Again, don't ask me what it's like in the question section. Whether they sell ice cream there, I doubt it. So if you like, is it Baskin-Robbins that has 31 flavors? You have to get back into the sense sphere. And if you want to go to nirvana also, you should avoid the formless sphere. Because in the formless sphere, you don't have the ability to cultivate wisdom to the highest level. because it's so peaceful, so tranquil, that one just remains in the state of utter tranquility and can't develop insight or wisdom. And now what's important to understand is that all three of these spheres, as I said, they belong to samsara. This is not liberation, not nirvana, not complete release. And so the ideal, the ultimate goal for the Buddha's teaching is to break out from the three realms of existence, to reach that completely transcendent state. So, if one develops the power of samadhi, of concentration, one can be reborn in the form sphere, live there for many hundreds and thousands of years, but eventually that comes to an end and one can be reborn elsewhere. One could develop the power of concentration, one gets reborn in the formless sphere, and one lives there for 20,000, sometimes they say 20,000 aeons, really long period. And so one is, without a body, but one is sitting there, in a sense, absorbed in this perfect bliss and tranquility. Then 10,000 aeons pass, 15,000, 18,000, 19,000 aeons, and now the sort of the ticker, the clock, like on the scoreboard, on the baseball games, the football games, it's going down, down, down till it gets to 24 hours, 12 hours, 6 hours, 3 hours, 1 hour, 59 minutes, 10 minutes, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 1 minute, then the second ticker starts, 60 seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds, 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, bing! What's going on? Whoops! Where am I? Then 9 months later, wah, wah! Mommy, mommy. Then 5 years later, Tommy, come, we're going to kindergarten. Then high school. Then have to apply for college admission. Then graduation day, then have to search for a job, all over again. Okay, so the aim is not to be reborn in one of these higher spheres, but liberation. Okay, so these are the three realms mentioned here, the three types of elements, which we also call realms. And then Ananda asks whether there's another way in which a monk can be called skilled in the elements. And then the Buddha says that there could be, and then he mentions that there are these two elements, the conditioned element and the unconditioned element. And these two can be understood in terms of this diagram that I've put on the board right here. So everything that comes within the three realms I think this marker is falling from the form realm down into the garbage bin or the recycle bin. So all of these belong to the conditioned element. And what is meant by conditioned Conditioned is anything that arises from causes and conditions. So according to the Buddha's teaching, everything within our ordinary experience arises from causes and conditions. Not only everything that arises within our experience, but we ourselves, the experiencer, arise from causes and conditions. So the body comes from causes and conditions. It came from, at the most basic level, with the original level, the union of a sperm with the egg. Then it was nurtured by nutrition, and now we exist. The body exists dependent upon food, air, water, particular type of climate. Every whole bundle of conditions support the body. And all of the mental experience depends upon conditions, upon objects, sense faculties, and so forth. So everything within experience, normal experience, is conditioned. But beyond the normal experience, there's one thing which is unconditioned, and that is nirvana. This is a dimension, a reality, a sphere, I don't know, you can use various other words, which does not arise through causes and conditions. So it's ever existent. It's described by the Buddha as unproduced, without any becoming or change, without any origination, and without any perishing or passing away. So it's called also the deathless. Okay, now that we've gone through these three sections on the elements, now I'll ask whether there's any questions.
How
Dina.
does karma play into all of this?
Okay, karma, you mean into this scheme of the elements?
Construct of causes and conditions. Mind.
Yeah, well, karma is one of the primary causes and conditions. So karma is, what is karma, what they call karma? Karma is actually volitional action which is motivated or driven by intention, by purpose. And so the intentions, our intentional actions, create this force called karma. And then karma is what, at the initial level, it's what brings rebirth into one of the spheres of existence. And then other accumulated karmas in the course of life, other karmas that have been accumulated will then bring results, particular results in the course of life. And as we go on in this sutta, we'll see that there's analysis or distinctions made in the different types of karma.
Thank you.
Yes, please. If we have this mobile microphone.
Regarding the formless sphere, those are the three stages or realms you're referring to.
Yeah.
How do you get, when you're down in the formless sphere, because you're deep in meditation and you're really just consciousness, how do you get from there to nirvana? You mentioned that you could be reborn again.
Yeah.
But how do you get to nirvana?
In the formless sphere, unless one has already reached the first stage of awakening, of enlightenment, the stage of stream entry or higher, in the formless sphere, one can't go directly to nirvana.
They can't.
Can't.
They can't?
Can't. Because in the formless sphere, one doesn't have a body, and in order to acquire the right understanding of the Dharma, one has to learn it, one has to hear it.
So in reality, the only form would be the sense sphere that can go up to nirvana, because even the formless sphere.
I believe in the form sphere, the beings in the form sphere can go to nirvana because they have physical bodies, and I mean, this is said in the text. I leave it to people whether to believe or not. But when the Buddha is giving discourses, the beings from the form sphere, invisible to human beings, but they can be around listening to the Buddha or some of the great masters teach the Dharma. And so they're able to hear it and to reflect on it and contemplate it. And so they could reach the stages of awakening within the form sphere.
But the most powerful one to be able to get directly to nirvana is in the sense sphere.
They say that the sense sphere provides like the strongest conditions because in order to reach even the first stage of awakening, one has to have some understanding of the extent of suffering, of dukkha. And it's in the human realm that we have the balance of suffering and happiness. We could see how they alternate, and we get a clearer perception of impermanence. So that's possible within the human realm.
What about the animal realm?
No. The three lower realms, it's not possible because the extent of misery in those realms is too heavy. So they're not able to they're obsessed with the idea, especially like the hell realms, the realm of the hungry ghosts or tormented spirits. There's too much pain and misery, and so they're just concerned with getting out of their misery.
So by getting out of the misery, they actually then kind of like are purifying down there before they get to the point where they can come back as a sense sphere, then be able to get to nirvana?
Well, they're sort of experiencing the results of their karma in those realms. And then when they exhaust that karma, then they can come back into the human realm. And then within the human realm, if they have good supporting conditions, then they can meet the teaching and then make some progress on the way to Nibbana. But it's always said that the human realm, and then above the human realm, there are some heavenly realms in which there's sensual experience. That these realms are more favorable than, let's say that the human realm is said to be the most favorable. In the heavenly realms, often those beings get swept away by their attachment to their intense sensual pleasures. Johnny?
Is there any volition formation in the formless sphere?
Yeah. When they go into these states of deep meditation, they're creating volitional formations in that state. And also they come out from that deep meditation and then they have volitional activities there. Of course, I don't know what they're like because it's beyond my own personal experience, but this is what is said in the text. Sandy?
The sutras emphasize the word cease here.
Can you explain a little bit more detail about this word cease? Cease the element. What does it mean by cease the element?
Knows and sees. This is a mental understanding. Doesn't mean visually seeing, but it means sort of seeing with the eye of wisdom or understanding them. And it doesn't mean, I don't think it means that every practitioner has to be able to have a direct, supernormal, direct visual experience of the beings in the form realm or the formless realm. But I think it just means to understand them more than intellectually, but to understand them with the eye of wisdom. That's the way I would understand it.
What's the reference material to get the details, like for all the spheres, the 15 planes, the 4 planes? Is there one book, or is that distributed over 20 volumes?
In the suttas, I don't think that they're collected into one sutta, but it's sort of, mentioned here, there, distributed over the four Nikayas. There is a book, it's in the Abhidharma Pitaka, which sort of collects all of this together. It's the book of the Abhidharma Pitaka. The Pali name is Vibhanga, but it's translated under the title The Book of Analysis. And it's published by the Pali Text Society.
Thank you.
And it's the last chapter of that book. I think it's chapter 16. It's called The Heart of the Doctrine, The Heart of the Dharma. That has it goes into a lot of detail using Abhidharma classifications, but it brings together all of this. And then I think also you find it in the comprehensive manual of Abhidharma, which I had put together, and then we've been using that book for our Abhidharma seminar. A comprehensive manual of Abhidharma in chapter 5. And it has everything in a diagram. You get it all in it's a 2-page diagram. Okay, let's go on because I want to finish the sutta today. Okay, now Ananda has finished asking about elements, so now he asks whether a monk can be called skilled in the bases. Here the term for bases is ayatana. Can I erase this? Okay, so these are the 6 bases for conscious experience. And we have 6 internal bases, which are the 6 faculties, 6 sense faculties: eye, ear, nose, tongue, body, and the mind faculty. And then 6 external bases, which are their objective realms: visible forms, sounds, smells, tastes, tactile objects, objects of touch, and mental objects, or mental phenomena, dharmas. And so these actually were pretty much we already covered under the elements. For some reason, the Buddha takes them out from the 18 elements and has a separate set of categories called the 12 bases. Okay, then we'll move on. The next topic, because the Buddha said that the monk should be skilled in dependent origination. So now Ananda asks, how can a monk be called skilled in dependent origination? And this is the very key doctrine in the Buddha's teaching. This is called in Pali it's called paticca samuppada. So the word paticca means dependent upon, and samuppada means origination, arising, but it suggests a complex process of arising. And so it's, in some of the describes this as the particular object of his realization on the night of his enlightenment. It was the discovery of dependent origination that brought his enlightenment, his awakening. And origination is both a kind of abstract principle, and then there is a way of exemplifying, a common exemplification of that principle. We find here in the sutta, we see the Buddha first states the abstract principle. He says, a bhikkhu knows thus, when this exists, that comes to be, with the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the cessation of this, that ceases. So the dependent origination means that any phenomenon, anything that exists, comes to be in dependence upon certain conditions. For something, we call this Y to arise, something else, its condition, X, has to arise. If Y depends upon X, and X hasn't arisen, Y can't arise. It's only when X has arisen that Y can arise. And when X ceases, if Y depends upon X, when X ceases, Y ceases. And so that is the abstract principle. But the Buddha wasn't, he wasn't an abstract philosopher interested in just, finding general principles. But his teaching was intended to solve the problem of birth and death, to gain liberation from the cycle of birth and death. So when he was investigating in the course of his enlightenment, he went back and inquired, why is there old age, suffering, and death? And then when he inquired, he said, old age depends on birth. So if one isn't born, he inquired, why is there birth? What is the condition for birth? The condition for birth, it's called in the text bhava, here translated being or existence. And what this means is that in the previous life there was some propensity to take existence. That there was a kind of force built up, this would be the force of karmic accumulations built up, was directing consciousness towards a new birth in one of the three of existence. Then why is there this propensity for new? Yeah, I think I know the source of the problem. I was getting the mic part caught under the...
Since no battery.
No, it's not there's no problem with the battery here.
Oh,
No, it's not the battery. This thing was getting caught under my robe to keep it. Okay, so why is there this propensity for new existence? Why is the stream of consciousness moving towards a new birth in one of the realms of existence? It's because of clinging, especially clinging to the notions of I and mine. Then why is there this clinging? He traces it back because of craving. Why is there craving? Because of feeling. Why is there feeling? Because of contact through the senses. Why is there contact through the senses? Because there are the 6 sense bases. Why are there the 6 sense bases? Because this complex of body and mind, of body and mental factors has come into existence. What does this complex of body and mental factors depend on? It all depends on consciousness coming into a new existence. Because consciousness is the channel that maintains continuity from life to life. Why has consciousness come into a new existence? Because of the volitional formations, the volitional activities, the various activities that have created karma. And why do we engage in these volitional activities, particularly those rooted in the mental defilements? That is because of ignorance. So that's a very concise explanation